and the Greek Orthodox Church of St. George. I'm Michael Haldis, your facilitator, and as always, we're getting started a little bit later. Actually, here at our parish today, I apologize in advance if you hear background noise. We have a basketball tournament we're hosting at our parish. I think someone just said 23 teams. So a lot of activity going on at the church. I was actually just grousing about it a little bit, but then I have to remind myself, even as I talk, it's really good to have a parish that's teeming with life every Sunday, in and out, even though sometimes getting started class on time pays the price. But we're here and welcome. And just to remind everybody, what we've been talking about in general this year is the theme, the mystery of salvation. And in particular, the last few weeks, we've been delving into the meaning of life. Pretty deep question. And we've been thinking of, in seriousness, what we've been talking about is trying to connect the dots between our daily, ordinary, everyday life and the meaning we're supposed to ascribe to all the things we do, and also how we find meaning and how that pertains to our salvation. And one of the things, last week we focused a lot on the effects of when you have loss of meaning in life, when you feel like certain aspects of your life, or maybe your entire life, doesn't have meaning, and really how it relates to what ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew said is an absence of love. And we explored that a little bit. So this week we're going to continue discussion on meaning of life, loss a little bit, how meaning relates to our choices and freedom of choice, and then being either slaves or mastering our desires. And maybe if we get into it, a deeper understanding of the Orthodox term theosis, because I think a lot of us think we know what that means, and maybe we do, but sometimes it means something other than what we think. But it's integral to our salvation and our spiritual growth. Before I get into that, there's one thing I did want to mention. Last week I had an occasion, I forget the context, but I had an occasion to bring up my quotes of the day, which I send out 5 quotes under a theme, several different blind copy email distribution lists that people use, I guess, as part of their daily prayer life, whatnot. I've been doing it about 12, 13 years. And I mentioned it last week because the context of what I was talking about, it lended itself. But I got several requests to be on it. So I thought I'd just mention it again. If you want to be on it, email me at sacramentalliving, one word, at verizon.net, and I'll add you to one of my blind copy distribution lists. You can also find the quotes at the Sacramental Living Facebook site. And it might be in a few other places, I forget. But anyway, enough of that digression. Let's talk about meaning and loss of meaning. And actually, today's gospel was pretty germane to what I wanted to talk about today, because in today's gospel, the rich man that was building bigger barns, he had a misguided sense of meaning. His meaning was in his wealth, and then he started putting meaning in what he thought was going to be his leisure, which wasn't. So let me start off with a question. How many of you are familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, beyond just its name? Anybody familiar with it?
Read it.
Anybody want to summarize it, or we're just getting started, John? Question on the table is being familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes.
More of Solomon's wisdom, right?
Solomons wisdom. Yeah. Some scholars debate who wrote it.
Yeah.
You'll see Quolet, or I forget who, the preacher. The author never identifies himself as Solomon, the preacher, but I'll get into it in a minute. The Orthodox Church accepts it was written by Solomon. Well, yeah, Solomon's wisdom is it's part of the wisdom literature in the Old Testament. But it's a good, you could argue that it is the Old Testament's version of our response to the question, what's the meaning of life? Because it opens. So it's 13 chapters. It's not incredibly long. I mean, you could read it in one sitting easily. But it opens, depending on your translation. The Orthodox Study Bible translation, actually the second verse says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And here's another version. This might be the best English translation. Futile, laments the teacher. Absolutely futile. Everything is futile. But here's my favorite. This is from the NIV. This is the first one I encountered Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So, make you want to read on? But by the end, by the 13th chapter, here's how he ends it. Hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole man. For God will bring every work into judgment, including everything that has been overlooked, whether it be good or evil. And our own Father Christopher Metropolis, in his new book, From Chaos to Christ, Father Christopher is the executive director of OCN. I just actually happened to read this morning. Keying on that phraseology, this is the whole man. He writes in his book, you cannot lead a wholesome life without first addressing the purpose of your existence. Orthodox Christianity is known to baptize each culture it enters. It takes from each culture the best it has to offer and then presents and implants a good, right theology to guide people to salvation. The key to doing this is to keep our senses open and let our lives be instructed. So, let's talk a little bit about this whole notion we talked about last week with Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew's quote, that the widespread sense that life has no meaning is to be blamed on the absence of love. Does anybody remember what we talked about last week? I'm not sure I do. But there's a couple of derivatives of that I think are important.
I wasn't here last
I
time.
wasn't either.
That's okay.
Yeah, we weren't either.
But surely you watched it
But to say that
and studied it.
due to the absence of love, just prioritizes love as the meaning of life.
Mhm.
And maybe one doesn't realize that at different stages of life seems to be recognized at the end of life when people face their mortality. But I think this book wants to remind us of it all the time. And it's also the greatest law that we're to obey.
You can even argue about face on mortality. It's always there. We just don't tend to, we become aware of it.
Yeah, when we have a terminal condition, we become aware of it.
Or some situation, right? John, you about to say something?
Not yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I do remember we talked somewhat last week about just the fact that when love is present, even if you're an atheist, right? Even if you're not consciously experiencing or thinking you're experiencing God, it's because it's derivative of truth, of reality. People can have meaning and lead meaningful lives. We would argue from Orthodox Christian perspective that maybe whatever life they're leading could be even greater or more meaningful if they had this understanding. But they still, because logos, the principle, Christ exists in all places and all things, and he's merciful and loving God, even when people don't acknowledge him, if his principles are being put in practice, his mercy and grace and energy are present.
And the truth is, we are created in his image.
Exactly.
Every single one of us. So.
And we related it last week to, this is important to keep reminding us, we related it to salvation with the seeds, because remember Christ said the good seed will yield a crop 30, 60, or 100-fold. So the question is, how much of this we embrace is how much of this fold we realize. And how that's why when Father Peter said a few weeks ago, your salvation is at risk, he was meaning is, it's what we choose. It's what we choose. It's how much of the life of Christ we want. And sadly, some people don't want it at all. Some people want it a little bit. They want it on their own terms, things like that. Go ahead, John.
Nothing profound here, more like a little anecdote that relates to all of this. But I had a discussion a few days ago with a man, a very, very wise man. And in the course of that discussion, I mentioned that there were some people that I considered toxic in my life that I have pushed out of my life. And he admonished me and said, every man and woman is created by God. God does not create toxic people. You love everyone that God has created, every man and woman, however detestable their behaviors are or their actions are. And it stuck with me because I sort of use that language loosely, right? Toxic people, people who are troublesome, or people who are ... And he said, no, you have to love everyone. And this is Christ's, of course, the second commandment, right? love God, that's kind of the easy part for those of us who profess to be Orthodox Christians. We love God, we carry out the faith, but loving our neighbors as ourselves, especially those that we find detestable, is the tough part. And I love the way he separated that. Love everyone, they're all creatures of God, however loathsome their actions may be, and just loathe their actions.
There's a beautiful quote about that, and I think it may have been in one of your daily send-outs, that our whole family sent it back and forth to each other, and it was so meaningful about if there's someone that you feel is really off the mark and who is doing what you think are really bad things, is to look deep within them. There must be something that is hurting in them. There must be something wrong there to make them act in such what we believe is ungodly way or an unchristian way. And that makes it, to me, that makes it easier. If you see someone that you feel is despicable or is just, you wonder what happened to them to make them that way.
I love where this conversation is going, because I think when we hear absence of love, at least my first reaction to it, I translated it about someone who is not being loved, right? You're not receiving love in your life.
Yes.
But then I thought the other thing is, are you giving love, right? The absence of love in your life could be because you're not loving people rightly around you. And in a culture that equates so much to thought and feeling, it's more of the action, right? Because I think we all have people in our life, whether we consciously label them as toxic, that it's hard, right? We were talking about caretaking situations, especially when you're in situations with what's required of you or what you should be doing is with a person who either doesn't receive what you're doing well, or you don't even like the person because of the way they behave, or all these judgments you make, but yet it's, to your point, you're not in those situations. Are you seeing them?
If we're all made by God and we all start the same, I believe something happens to those people. I remember years ago when Father Al was here and he started a Bible study, and I said to him, all that we know about mental illness now, if a schizophrenic murders someone, we know that that's not really that person murdering them. Will God forgive him because he knows that he didn't do that murder? And Father, this was probably over 20 years ago, Father Al said, I would hope so. And that's the way I feel. I just feel that something has happened to make those people the way they are.
This is where I think too, having the, go ahead.
No.
Sorry. No.
I was going to ask, which translation of love are we talking about?
You mean like agape, philos, storge, all of it?
All of it?
All of it. Yeah. I mean, the
Right.
Greek language breaks it up, which gives us better perspective. But
Yeah,
we're
so
talking about
is
all.
there a word that, like, which word was used? Which Greek word was used when he said that?
When the ecumenical.
Yeah,
prayer?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I read it in English. I don't know what Greek word he used. I know in the Gospel of John, at the end of it, did we talk about this? I can't remember. When Christ.
With Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we talk about that? Yeah, but he used agape, and philo.
Yeah.
But I've come to understand. At first, I thought that was Christ condescending to where Peter was, but that's not true. John used agape and philo interchangeably. So in John's mind, the use of the word, there wasn't much difference, because
I heard Father Stephen Freeman on Interfaith Radio talk about it.
Oh, did he?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he's a biblical scholar and speaks Aramaic and three
Yeah.
other ancient languages. And he said, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it's all the same.
that was DeYoung, Father Stephen DeYoung.
Father Stephen
Yeah.
DeYoung, I'm sorry, I get mixed up.
Yeah.
What do you mean he said it was all the same?
He said when Christ asked the 3
Mhm.
times, he said when you translate it, it's all agape. It's not the 3
Philo,
different
the third one?
like friendly love.
Well, the third one, it is philo, but it doesn't mean something different.
Yes.
That's what and see, in this is in the Orthodox Study
Why is it a
Bible.
different
It's
word,
common
though?
teaching. It's common teaching
Yeah.
that Christ was condescending to where Peter was. Now he was, but you couldn't teach that conclusion based on that language.
Why is it a different word then if it's the same? That doesn't make sense.
You'll have to ask the gospel writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just
This is
what
the
what
first
fa-
time hearing that.
yeah, what Father Stephen Young talks
Yeah.
about. He says a lot. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's a very learned biblical scholar, but he's not just a biblical scholar. He's an historian. He understands culture, so he's really good teacher at wrapping it all together. So what he's talked about, and some other Orthodox scholars have talked about too, that are especially those that really understand etymology and language, is that they remind us that language derives meaning from how it's used. It doesn't have an intrinsic meaning in and of itself. So John, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe someone else knows, he used philo and agape interchangeably. But I would, and now this is me talking, I would say this, because I used this in a lecture not too long ago. I pointed out in John 15:15 that Christ said to the disciples, "I now call you my friends."
Mhm.
So friendship with God, friendship is up here in the back. So John, the beloved of Christ, is equating friendship with this agape, what we think of as the agape love, this high form of
No
love.
greater love have man
And
than
then
this.
lay
that
down
he
his
loved
life for his
friend.
friends. Exactly.
That's,
So
fits in.
and so then tying this back to what you said, I would say that loving God is easy than loving others, except for the fact we're probably deluding ourselves that we love God if we're not loving others the right way, because Christ didn't separate them; they go together. And we were Vasily left. We were talking about epiphany moments in life, but 99.9% of our encounter with God is through other people, not through blinding lights and voices and dreams and all of that. So, for me at least, as I've gotten older, it's been more sobering to evaluate my spiritual practices and then kind of step back objectively and look what I'm doing with all the people God chooses to bring into my life, including those I've thought of toxic, because when you're in the business world, you certainly think you encounter a lot of toxicity.
They're not toxic.
Right, but I'm saying, but our first dialogue with ourselves is, this person is toxic, and I'm not going to be polluted by this person. But we're not saying, Lord, why are you bringing this toxic person into my life? We don't go there first. Most of us don't. Better people maybe. I don't.
A quote: "Hate the sinner, hate the sin, not the sinner."
Right?
Love
the sinner, hate the sin.
Sin, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically what you're saying.
I just didn't live it,
Yeah.
and now I have to.
And I would say the execution of that thought, we mess it up a lot. But go ahead, Andy. You had your hand up.
I was going to say that from a non-biblical basis, from practical things, and today there's, I think, an awful lot of very strong argument for the thesis of orthodoxy, which is love. The older I get, the more I see and the more I encounter people who also see that if you're really down and you're really depressed, far and away, the best thing you can do to get out of depression is to do some things for other people.
Oh, yeah.
And sort of unconsciously, suddenly you're in a better mood and you don't know why. Very directly clear. Now, the other one, you probably have to be quite old to perceive this, because when you get older, you can't sleep in the middle of the night, and so you'll see things on YouTube that are fascinating. Well, middle of the night last night.
Just so happens.
Very good. I think I've told you before that this whole thing about near-death experiences. Now, University of Virginia has a major program, Oxford University. So these are really serious people doing it. But the one last night was absolutely so insightful. They're asking all these people who had these. They said, well, what is the feeling when you get this beam and you do these things? They said, going home. And what's the focus? And the word love. That's what they all came up with.
Yeah.
Now, to really add some, what I think is practical verification for the near-death experiences was, many people, when they're on the operating table, they die and they float up to the ceiling, and they can then later recount what so-and-so said to so-and-so. A woman who was born blind and had never seen in her life had a near-death experience. And they're saying, well, that's just your brain cells degenerating. And she said, if it was just brain cells, how was I also affecting all the people in the operating room? And why? I could see people I'd never seen before. I could repeat people in another room what they were saying to each other. And so the thesis that this near-death scene really focuses in on love, and more of these verifications, I think it's very endorsing of our faith.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell a story. This is I'm not going to use names, but this wasn't me. Just to be clear, I'm not saying because I'm embarrassed about the story. I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to, like Paul, trying to talk about some experience. Remember Paul in the Bible. Somebody I know told me the story about themselves. They were praying for a dying youth, right? And the young man did die, and they were so. She became so fervent in her prayer. She so much wanted this young man to survive, right? And she said, this is the story she told me. She said, all of a sudden, she goes, I felt enveloped by love. And I looked across the room and I saw myself across the room. I was outside myself, outside my body. And I got fearful and went back. But she said, and she's not particularly religious, by what we would consider. She said, I never, ever forgot the imprint, the experience of that love. And I know, and she goes, even though I've not, I don't go to church like I should. I don't do all these things I should. I know God is love. So, and I believe her. I totally believe her.
And I think that when we are really focusing in on our relationship with God and making the time to be very prayerful, to make sure that we are repentant and we're doing the things that the church teaches us, then we're really given the grace to be able to love those around us and to see things. God gives us this grace to be able to see and have empathy, which is what you're talking about, right? God is the one that's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. We don't know what has happened in people's lives to bring them where they are, to feel what they're feeling, at the moment, and to treat us the way that they treat us. But like you were saying, that wise person shared with you, we must love them no matter what. That's what we're called to do.
It's exactly what we're called. And it's actually what, I don't want to say infuses, but it actually takes the scales off our eyes to perceive the meaning, not only of the encounter, but in general, deepen our understanding of the meaning of our life, which is to be Christ-like, right? Don't let your light shine before men. You guys each said a couple of things I want to hit on too. So you talk about grace. Well, how do we understand grace in the Orthodox Church? It's participation in God's energies, which are to love others. And then I think it was you, Andy. I wrote down misery loves company. Somebody, because I was actually telling someone close to me this the other day, because this person was feeling kind of isolated, and I said, your inability to want to appear to be vulnerable is causing you to isolate yourself, and you're going down this spiral. You're not sharing. But I said, notice that when you share, you feel better. You ever notice when you share? I told this person, when you share something and that person's going through the same exact thing, you feel better. Misery loves company. Well, not vindictively. It's because you realize you're not alone. You have shared experience. And so that's another aspect of love is that sharing. And this is what provides the meaning. But I want to go back to lack of meaning in this gospel today. Remind me of another gospel, another gospel where Christ, another parable where Christ is, again, it has to do with wealth, but I always want to be cautious because it's the love of wealth, not wealth itself, that's evil, right? It's how people. So just to be clear, but this one priest reminds us. He says that American researchers, I don't know where he got this from, claim that 100% of cases of drug addiction are associated with a sense of loss of meaning of life. And he talked about logotherapy and Viktor Frankl and meaning. But another priest talking about this same thing brought up the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And the reason here's where I'm connecting the dots, just so you know. So I've read a lot about addiction because I've experienced a lot of addiction in my life with people around me. So I've studied it enough to be dangerous, not expert. But one strain of thought, I don't know if it's correct or not, one vein of thinking is that there really no such thing as addiction. It's just ingrained habit. And this particular researcher points to a bunch, I might have told this story before, a bunch of soldiers that were in Vietnam, and in order to cope with the atrocities of Vietnam, all did heroin. But those that came back to their life and their life was stable again and there was meaning in their life, kicked it. And heroin's supposed to be majorly addictive. I've been up close with heroin addicts, but the ones did not. And so this is the case he's making for habit. Now, here's where I want to connect this dot, how ingrained habit can be in us. Because one guy talking about the rich man and Lazarus, he said the rich man no longer saw Lazarus begging because it just become habitual to see beggars. So ingrained in the habit, he no longer saw this person as a human being. And I started thinking about that, talk about meaning in life. How easy is it for us to, getting back to the toxic person, so to speak, how easy is it for us to have the habit of not seeing or thinking about certain people because we've had these labels or whatnot. And I think it's all too easy. And then I started even extrapolating that further. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many meaningful encounters I blow each day because I'm habitually thinking a certain way, a beggar at the intersection or whatever. And then I think, the times I've talked to a person, not just giving them money, but he just had the courage to say, what is your deal? It's a human being. You usually get these stories and you're thinking, how do you end up here? You don't have much time to talk because the light goes green, but that kind of thing. So anyway, any reaction to that? Did I connect these threads or did it all seem disparate?
No, you connected them very well.
Okay. So I think that, and I think when we do that, we're actually stunning our growth a little bit. We talked, Vasily had to leave, but we were talking about, I haven't been there, but we were talking earlier about the monastics. And if you've been to Mount Athos, most people come away, there's something there that this would be wonderful to have, right? And I think that what's there is available to the non-monastic. It's just harder to integrate these threads in our life together because of these type of things that I think diminish the meaning. So then we start having buckets of meaning. There's meaning in my life here. There's meaning in my life here. This doesn't contribute to the meaning. That kind of thing. Thoughts, reactions, any of that?
It just reminds me again that this may be off point, but that there are things in the world that we experience that reinforce this theme.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them I was recalling that when I was very young and somebody really treats you just horrible. You make a part-time job out of trying to pay that person back. And I don't remember what age I realized, you also pay a price when you go to pay that person back.
Yeah.
But if you don't pay them back and you just understand that, this may be the wrong way to think about it, the world will take care of them. And you keep watching, and sure enough,
it does.
Wham, they get hit worse than you would have ever done anything back from them. So it does you no good to go after them. There's something in this world that we live in that takes care of these things for you and that encourages the not.
That's what
And
Christ
it does
says.
you great harm.
It does us spiritual harm because I didn't say it earlier, but we talked about mortality. And we were talking about a culture of death, right? Because sin is in the world, immediately we're born into death. And our whole life is about having life in Christ, finding life. And so Christ gives us all these principles, and sometimes we just dismiss them as sayings. Love your enemies, right? Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Love your enemies, because embedded in that is what you're talking about. He doesn't want us. He wants us to find him. Like the abundant life, John 10:10, we're not going to do it if we think it's up to us to provide the payback.
Yeah.
And furthermore, since we believe he's working for that person's salvation at all time, we may actually get in the way by paying back. Even we've all had that experience. I think where when we did refrain, we saw something that happened to that person. Even if that thing is awful, it's usually one of two things, and it's most of the time God's still actively working for that person's salvation, or sometimes on occasions you see this in the scriptures. Because the person would not relent from evil, God's had enough, and he's taken that person away, not to cause more harm. But for things like that. But it's still.
What do you mean by taken away?
Well, removing them. like in the old
They
death.
die- they
Yeah,
die.
yeah, because there no that person exhausted all chances, and that's just by their choice, and we can get into that a little bit to kind of keep threatening. We're to get more into this free will and choice, and
Well, it's
Mm.
like you said to me one time, the reason Judas is where he was is because he didn't turn around and say, Christ, please forgive
Right.
me.
exactly. And there's other people. In his case, Judas is a very, very sad story because he had such a deep remorse, but not
Mhm.
repentance.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but
There's a difference.
What you said was shame, but he had remorse and shame. But the repentance meaning go and say to Christ, I'm sorry.
because he had an
Please
absence
forgive
of
me.
love. In the end, his
Wow.
his absence of love is what would be ego or self-love, right? He still couldn't find it in himself to go back to Christ. And this is, I have notes here. I didn't go down this thread too much because we were going down a different thread that I thought was good. But a lot of absence of love is self-love. Self-love manifested in the way it connects to meaning is the idols we make of things and that we pursue that we think have meaning, right? So it can be our jobs, our career. It could be a lot of different things that are benign or even seem good on the surface, but our orientation to them is a manifestation of self-love. There's a big difference between doing charitable deeds to be known by men
Mm-hmm.
versus doing charitable deeds because your heart is with that person you want. There's the deed itself is used by God, but you yourself may not be growing, or you think you're fooling God, you're not. Your heart might not be in the right place because it's still all about you and how you look or what's good, or even if how you feel good, which is built. Good deeds are built into us to make us feel good. But if we're obsessing over how good we feel in the good deed, you know what I'm saying? It's always a slippery slope. And I don't know if we'll get to it, but Father Thomas Hopko talks a lot about this, about how even church service can be demonic and good deeds because our hearts aren't oriented right. So it gives the devil a foothold.
Mm-hmm.
You're so good.
Mm-hmm.
You're such a good person. Everybody loves you. You're doing good deeds. Before you know it, your
ego.
your original purpose is becoming corrupted by the praise and the adulation.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you nuts if you think about it too much. The best thing is just like the end of Ecclesiastes: love God and keep His commandments.
And Lord of mercy.
Lord of
Started
mercy.
me a
there
sinner.
and ended there.
Yeah.
You make a good point, I gotta say. Sociologically, Greek Orthodox, plenty of problems. Anybody who's Greek really preachers are partially crazy. But one of them is not. One of them
Partially?
is not this braggadocio thing, bringing on all the attention to me you can get. For some reason, our people do tend to be humble, and I think it's maybe Orthodox more than anything else. Is the reason.
Yeah, well, I think also too, Orthodoxy and woven into the Greek culture, the mythologies was always, what was the biggest cause of all the problems? Hubris.
Yeah.
It's always hubris, right? And that's really the better word for pride, like Lucifer, like pride. So it's part of the Greek culture.
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange mix. It's like we understand about hubris and humility, but we got to be in charge. Because how else am I going to bring about hubris and humility unless I'm in charge, right?
Like I think the very essence of love, like without which there is no love, and that is putting the other first.
Yeah, it is that humility. Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
You can put the other first in a million ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're more patient, you're more tolerant, you're praying, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So it's this like large verb that love is
Yeah.
that can express itself in as creative as we are. That's how many ways we can show love, but it's always putting the other first. And that's what, right? I mean,
Always, and actually putting
that's
the other
like parents,
first and getting.
you suffer for your own child.
Oh, right, exactly.
Right? I'd suffer for my own child.
That's what I was thinking.
We do suffer for our
Right.
children.
But the thing is, doing that doesn't always feel like the modern version of love as being sometimes loving your children doesn't feel like love. It feels more like forbearance.
I think we're all talking about the same thing. And you said before, like when somebody's not feeling well and you do something good for somebody else, how much better you feel. And you mentioned the line before about no love,
No greater love in
no
men
greater
than
Yeah.
love than laying
man
down your.
is this.
We're all talking about the same thing.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Transcending yourself, getting out of your own self, out of your own head, and loving and helping and reaching out and uplifting other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
It comes down to that, and I would say,
Seems that, no matter which way we go, it's always getting out of yourself and taking care of other people.
But
That's
there is
why-
a boundary, I think.
Huh.
A boundary, because love is relational. And I'm sorry.
No, no.
I just got to get this out.
no, please.
There is a boundary, right? Because a lot of it is relational. It's interactive. Love is interactive, right? With enemies, with children, everybody. But, you know, it's about putting the other first, but never above the truth.
That's a very
That's
good
a very-
point.
Yeah.
That's got to be the boundary
Very good.
for it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only thing more important in relationships.
The truth of
Is
God,
the
I guess
truth.
we should
Well,
say.
yeah.
But that's where they go together, right?
Today,
The
people
truth.
can use.
I mean, I'll put
the-
gravity above relationship too. You know, and that one's true.
Yes.
But the
All
two
of the
commandments
truth.
go together. Love God and love your neighbor.
Right.
Your neighbor is
Absolutely.
every other man and woman that God has ever created.
Right.
I heard Father Stephen DeYoung, if you're ever interested in a very interesting Bible study, it's called the Hope Council of God. It's on APP
Yeah.
radio. And he is a great historian,
Oh, yeah.
but he's a PhD in biblical scholar. But he keeps saying, and I think we all need to get this in, when somebody does something good, it's not that person doing it, it's God doing
Yeah,
it. through
God's
them.
good.
And that's a really good way to keep yourself humble.
Yeah. That's actually
And Christosomos, blessed memory, used to always say that. He'd always, we'd praise him and he'd say, thanks be to God, or all the glory be to God.
maybe we'll another minute or two, and then we'll close. And it's a good segue to where we were going next, actually, is because this is where Father Thomas Hopko talks a lot about this. Remember, I would joke about what he said: "We have free will, we have no choice." Remember that? But, and I have a longer quote. Maybe I won't read it this week, but the essence of it is, and this is where we can really understand what theosis really means to be Christ-like, is a place where we get to where this conversation wouldn't have been even being had, because we would be in such a place of self-forgetfulness that we were just doing these things. And that's what Christ shows us in the sheep and the goats, right? The sheep didn't even know what they were doing. They were just doing it. Like, when did we see you? Because for them, it was as natural as breathing. And that's what theosis really is. It's this aligned. See, we think of free will too often. Free will means choice, and it does to an extent, but not, yes and no. It's the choice that brings the natural will that God gave us in his image and likeness into alignment to where our choices and it's all just one thing, like before sin entered the picture. So, and that's what theosis really is. And this is what we have with the saints. They got to this place of humility and self-forgetfulness, this place of just being, fulfilling God's purpose in them for whatever they were called to. And so that's what Father Hopko, and I guess Father DeYoung talks about it too. God's goodness, God doesn't need us. He created us out of love for love. And so his goodness is going to be achieved. Out of love, he invites us to participate in it. And so if there's a good we don't choose to do in a given situation, he's going to accomplish that good with somebody else or some other thing. But we're missing the opportunity. And so the more we grow and these things become more natural, like breathing, that's kind of the goal. That's what the sacramental life is all about, to where things just become second nature. But we're imperfect, weak people, all of us. I mean, even the saints were weak. So that's why we have these conversations and stuff, because we need to reinforce it with each other, but also as a reminder, and then draw strength from other people's examples. That's why we have the saints in each other, because just like today, we share different experiences and share different things. And this is how, I don't want to call it enlightenment, but this is how things start sinking in here more than just here. And I know Chrysostom talked about that. So
we were having a very interesting discussion with
you and Andy?
Andy.
Okay. Giving you a chance.
A wonderful couple. He's Jewish, and they just recently come together, and she was raised Episcopalian. And she was saying, to find the Jewish religion, it's really impressive that their job is to do everything on earth, to accomplish goodness on earth, and there's nothing after.
Nothing after life.
Yeah.
And then she said, whereas we, something about, well, we are doing things just so we can go to heaven or something like that. And I said, well, orthodoxy to me is different in that our job on earth is to go towards theosis, and I explained what that was. But then I was thinking later, we also have a little bit of that, we want to have eternity with God. But I don't know that we have this fear of hell, and that's why we do everything the way
Be for yourself.
Well,
Catholics do it. Am I wrong?
no, you're not wrong. So first of all, your friend, that is certainly part of Jewish thought, that there's nothing else, but that's not entirely true for all Jewish thought.
Well, I know
Yeah.
another Jewish friend that says they do think there's something.
Yeah, they do, but
How sad.
and if you've listened to Father DeYoung, you'll know, you've probably heard him say this, that everything we need to know is right in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
So it's ingrained in the Jewish culture and the Hebrew culture to do these things on earth, right? So I would say that's good. The wrong thinking is there's nothing more. Christian, it's not so much in orthodoxy, but certainly, although Orthodox people can espouse what I'm about to explain, but we're protected from it because of our belief system. But there's certainly a strain of Christian thought that borders on Gnosticism, where this material life, the physical, doesn't really matter. It's all the goal of getting to heaven. And that's wrong-headed too. We don't believe that. We don't believe in heaven like that, like we've talked about here. You see at the end of the Bible, heaven and earth, or heaven in the Bible just means sky. It's going to be the complete restoration of creation as it was meant to be. We will be embodied, and everything we do here right now has a direct bearing on ushering in the kingdom. So it all comes, but both strains of thought come back to, yes, it's very important what we do here. Daily life and our physical life, the physical and spiritual, are just 2 words used to talk about one thing. It all goes together. So that's why I said, if we come here, we worship, we pray, and do all these things, and then we go out there and just ignore everybody, we may feel spiritual, but we're not. It's all together. So anyway, that was a good discussion today.
Indeed.
So let's close now. I know we're not too far past time for starting so late.
I got to tell you, the laugh I got in my middle of the night encounter. This one woman had this near-death experience, and she was talking to somebody. Said, "So, you mean this happens to everybody?"
Excuse me,
Yeah.
send me a text for what you want from Jersey Mike's. Not everybody, just one.
Okay.
Those online, whatever you want from Jersey Mike's, put it in the chat.
Here. My wife's flying.
I recommend the Philly cheesesteak. Jersey, forget it. Anyway.
And so she said, "You mean even Hitler?" And wherever she was said, "Yes." And I thought to myself, can you imagine being Hitler? You die, you see, all of a sudden you see what all these other people see. You say, "Oh my God, did I miss the mark?"
Missed the mark.
Yeah.
Well, I used to say to my kids when they were all growing up, you can't hate anybody. I said, because it brings you down. I said, you can't hate anybody but Hitler. And then the more I knew Michael and going to classes, I said, okay, you can't hate Hitler.
Yeah,
either.
I'm not a Hitler apologist, obviously, but in
No,
speaking about theosis, I will say one thing. No, I wasn't saying you were suggesting I was, but that's the
Yes.
point. Because this is what I'm about to say. We understand theosis, that God will take the smallest bit of good we have and bless it, right? And if the most evil people have a little shred, that's the grace they will experience. But they've eliminated by their own action and choice. They've cut themselves off from so much more of a greater experience. So yeah, so we can't make, just because of who we think is the personification of evil, and we can certainly rightly point to many evil things. We can't play God. We can't talk about someone's salvation
That's
or
the way
damnation.
it's saying.
That's the what
That's
you
the way
yeah.
it's saying it.
Yeah, and I was just being clear, because even someone as evil as Hitler, as we perceive him to be, if there was a kernel of something that could experience God's grace, God will. That's how we understand theosis. So, yep. Anyway, all right. Well, we'll close there. I guess next week is Thanksgiving weekend, so there won't be any religious education. So we'll pick up again in
First weekend of December.
first weekend in December, and then we should be good until Christmas. So, all right. God bless everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks.